take what resonates with you and leave the rest. Baby step your way. So small progress is still progress. And then again, reach out if you have any questions. So I love the sun. I've loved the sun since I was a kid. I feel the best when it's warm outside and sunny outside. Although I still am a fan of the rain. I love a good rainy day, but I love being outside in the sun and I'm not afraid of it. Now, with that being said, I have kids. Like one of my oldest kids, she is definitely a little bit afraid of the sun. She has taken sun health and safety to a definite extreme. And so to the point that I had to actually, encourage her and get her to talk to her doctor about her fears around the sun. And I'll explain a little bit more about that later. But I just want you to know I'm coming at this from an approach of not trying to avoid the sun, but really making sure that you're healthy and that you're safe in the sun. So it does feel good for me to walk in the sunshine. I texted Miranda right before I started class and said, I am doing my 20 to 30-minute walk on my lunch break right before the class. And I sent her a picture and I was like, sunshine is definitely on the agenda. It's very hot today. So this is a video. I'm not going to show it here, but it is in the slides. So when you go back, you can watch this video. It's just a few minutes long, but it's the CDC's guide to what you should know about sun safety. And most of what we're going to cover is actually in the slides here. But this is a nice video that if you wanted to share it out with your friends or family, or maybe you are doing something on campus that a very short video would be helpful. I just wanted to provide that to y'all. Okay. So befriending the sun. Ooh, we skipped ahead. So befriending the sun. Spending outside time is so important for our overall health. So if we're going to be, outdoors, we, want to be physically active, we want to reduce our stress, we need to get some good vitamin D because vitamin D really acts like a vitamin and like a hormone in our body. And vitamin D is needed at the cellular level in our bodies to be able to do so many of the like day-to-day operations within our body. And so vitamin D is not just about, getting a supplement and taking that. That's okay. But the reason we call it a supplement is because you're literally supplementing what you can't get from your everyday lifestyle in a pill form. And so anytime you can get the real thing is always going to be better than the supplement, especially because a lot of our supplements today have a lot of fillers and binders and chemicals and things. And a lot of times they're not really what we call bioavailable because they're synthetic. And so a lot of people can't process synthetic vitamins as well as they can the actual thing. So having fortified food that has vitamin D in it, having supplements are never going to be as good as getting out and actually consuming vitamin D in our our lifestyle with the sunshine and in our diets. And so I'm always a fan of doing that first, and then of course supplementing when necessary. So my disclaimer is that I actually supplement with vitamin D. I have been deficient, severely to moderately deficient in vitamin D for the last 10 years or so. And I have taken everything from 50,000 international units of vitamin D once a week prescribed by my doctor to every over-the-counter supplement to, being outdoors in the sun more than I would typically be to try to get some good vitamin D synthesis going on outside, and nothing worked. And so one of my good friends, when I reached out to her about this, suggested that I try a new protocol with vitamin D and K2, which helps the absorption along with magnesium at night. And that has made all of the difference. So she recommended this particular brand. No affiliation, but because of the way that it had the uptake with the K2 and the magnesium, it helps my body be able to process it. And I will not have my levels checked again until October because of the way that our insurance actually pays for those kinds of retests. But I can tell you within 2 to 3 weeks of taking that vitamin D supplement, after having taken almost everything that you could possibly take over the counter prescribed, I felt the difference. Vitamin D is so important. It does everything from impacting cholesterol to impacting pain to, cellular function. We talk about the powerhouse of the cell being the mitochondria. If you're low in vitamin D, the mitochondria, the cell, can't do its job. And so literally everything in your body is impacted by that. And within 2 weeks, I saw noticeable differences. So I'll share more about that. But can't say this enough. It's such an important vitamin. And when you're outside, you want to be able to work and play and do what you love outside without risking your increase for skin cancer. And you can do that by protecting your skin in all the usual ways. And I'll tell you some of my favorite things to do as we go through. Most skin cancer is caused by too much exposure to UV light or ultraviolet light. And so it's that invisible radiation that comes from the sun, but also tanning beds and sun lamps and other things. Of course, you have things like saunas with infrared light. You've got lights that are small that you can use at home. So there's other products and devices that can cause some of that exposure as well, although infrared light is a little bit different. You just want to be, careful around any types of exposures like that because it can increase your risk of cancer. You also want to be really mindful of going outdoors in the morning and in the afternoon to get at least 5 to 10 minutes of sunshine without sunglasses on. Now, this is really hard for me because I'm very photosensitive with my eyes. So if you see me outside, you're probably going to see me with sunglasses on. I will turn my car around and go back home to get my sunglasses if I don't have them. And so you're rarely going to see me without sunglasses on outside. But it is something that I'm working on because research has shown in the last couple of years that our lack of exposure with our cornea and with our eyes, seeing sunlight in the morning and seeing sunlight in that sunset time, we want to see sunrise hours, we want to see sunset hours, really helps with our overall health and wellness, particularly making sure that our circadian rhythm stays on its intended cycle. Because if we get off our circadian rhythm, that rhythm that's our internal clock that tells our body, okay, it's time to do this thing, then we can have a lot of ill effects. And when we have blue light exposure, like you can see my face is kind of lit up from the screen. When we have that kind of blue light exposure from our screens, meaning that we've got blue light instead of that yellow or red light from the sun, we have it on our devices like our cell phones, our TVs, our computer screens, our Kindles, our iPads, all of those things. If we're not being really mindful by having filters on that when it gets dark outside, especially, or if we're not wearing glasses that block that blue light, then we are really training our eyes to never really be in that natural rhythm, which we call the circadian rhythm. And so that's why we have poor sleep. That's why we're not able to process stress as well. So it's something that you want to consider. One of the best ways to start to reset this cycle is to get out in the morning within about 30 minutes of waking and in the morning hours before 10 o'clock and get that good sunlight. Now, of course, you don't want to stare directly at the sun, but just be outside. Maybe you're watering your flowers in the summertime, or maybe you're having your coffee on your porch. Whatever it is, you don't have to look directly at the sun. You just want to be outside and be in nature without sunglasses on. So I am working on that. That's a 2024 goal. And then do that again in the evening when you get home. And it's great when it's summertime in the South because you have so much time to be able to get that sunshine in. So those are two things. It doesn't help if you're wearing any kind of glasses. So, clear reading glasses or regular glasses, bifocal glasses are fine, but if you can do it without, that's better. And then you're not getting it by driving to work. So the windshields, especially because so many things are tinted, you really need to be out in nature in the direct light. So driving to work, driving home from work does not count for that. I get that question a good bit. So as we're befriending the sun, we also are mindful of boundaries, right? When we have friendships, we have boundaries around those friendships. So we're going to be friends with the sun, but we're going to have boundaries. And part of that is, wearing glasses when we need to wear glasses during the hottest part of the day. The 10 to 3 is usually what we say, 10 to 4 sometimes when it's getting really, really hot, and then 9 to 3 in other time zones. Those are going to be when the UV rays are the strongest. But it's important to note that you can still get sunburn and sun damage on cloudy and cool days because it's going to reflect off surfaces, right? Cement, asphalt, sand, snow, of course, water. So anytime you're near a pool, a lake, a river, a stream, a pond, an ocean, that's why you're more likely to get sunburn because of that extra reflection. And also, you're probably staying out longer because there's fun things to do near water. And so, when you are looking at your weather forecast, one of the things that you can do, and some of the new computers actually give this as a setting on your taskbar or toolbar at the bottom or top of your screen, it can give you the strength of the UV rays for that day. And so, if your index for UV is higher than 3, then you want to make sure that you have extra protection on your skin and that you're protecting your skin using things like SPF or other products year round. So not just in, the warm summer months or spring months, but also throughout the year. So, in the winter, even in December, January, February, we should be really mindful of this. Okay, so UAV versus UVB, UVA versus UVB rays. There are those two types, and both can be harmful. The UVA are rays that penetrate deep into the layers of the skin, and those can lead to things like premature wrinkling and aging, those fine lines and wrinkles that you'll sometimes see around the eyes or the mouth and nose. But the UVB rays are the primary reasons why we have sunburn. So they're going to be the ones that penetrate the outer layer of the skin and can cause actual damage to the skin. So too much exposure can for either of these or a combination of both can cause skin cancer. And so again, that's why it's so important to protect your skin year round. So on a cloudy day, even about 80% of the rays from the clouds will come through. And then, of course, if people are using tanning beds or if they're using any kind of product to enhance the skin, then it's really, really important that those people are educated about the hazards of that. So for tanning beds, I will give a personal story. I always feel like it's important to teach from personal experience when it has a connection to what we're teaching, because we can teach textbook all day. This is what I tell my nursing students, but it's nothing like having the stories. The stories are going to stick with you. I tell my students all the time, you're not going to remember what was on, slide 3 or, page 52 in the textbook, but you might remember a story that I tell you. And so for me, I had psoriatic arthritis diagnosed as a child, and that's psoriasis and an arthritis that's associated with that skin disorder. It's an autoimmune inflammatory process. And so I actually had a doctor recommend that I use the tanning bed, and this was in the late 90s, early 2000s. So, of course, we've had a lot of research since then that shows tanning beds are not healthy and not safe. But they actually told my mother, who's a nurse, to use a tanning bed to help me with the pain and the arthritis and the skin plaques that I was having from psoriasis. I don't think any doctor would probably recommend that today, but I took it to heart because I did feel better. So all throughout my teens, I used tanning beds frequently, especially during the winter because I would get very, very sore joints. And so that was part of helping that relief. And so I had a tanning package that, was endorsed by my physician and that my parents paid for and made sure that I got to those appointments because that was supposed to help with the arthritis. And it did help with the pain management, but it also severely increased my risk for skin cancer. And so I'll connect that a little bit later on, but it's just important to always stay up to date on the newest recommendations. So I took time this morning to update our slides because every day in healthcare, things are changing, and it's really, really important to stay on top of that. It can be overwhelming though, so I want to just encourage you to do what you can, because a lot of times we don't take any action because we feel like, well, I don't know what the right thing to do is. Especially when it comes to our wellness, there's just so much information out there. There's almost this overwhelming sense of I'm not sure who to listen to because there's a lot of conflicting things. And usually we just follow our habits if we don't know which choice to make if it's not clear. And there's a lot that's unclear sometimes in healthcare today. So hopefully we're going to help with that today and give you some good choices on how to be um, an enjoyer of the sun, but also healthy and safe. So the UVA is the aging and the wrinkles. The UVB is the burning, and the top layer of your skin. So the skin layer that you can feel is going to be that epidermis, and then below that is going to be your dermis, and then below that's going to be your hypodermis. So hypo means usually low or below that normal skin layer. And so you've got those 3 layers of protection, and your skin is actually your biggest, largest body system or organ system of the body. And so that's a frequent nursing school question. And I think it's cool to share with y'all because we often don't think about it. Even me as a nurse, I don't think about that all the time. And so it plays a huge role, your skin does, in protecting the internal organs. So if your skin is not intact, meaning that, it's free of like sores or lesions or cuts or scrapes or things like that, if it's not intact and if it's not hydrated, and if you're not drinking enough, if it's not moisturized, and at its optimum, then it's not protecting your body to the degree that you would like. And if you have sunburns, that's going to compromise your overall health, which will compromise your immunity and just your skin protection in general. And so we often don't think about that. And I say that as a way to empower you about how important it is for your skin. Sometimes we think about, oh, I just don't want to get burned. I don't like the look of that, or I don't want to have wrinkles. I don't want to show aging or aging spots or things, which can all be associated with the sun. But there's so much more going on with your skin. And so we want to be able to help you with the aesthetics of it, but also with the health aspect. So with the UV index, we said if it's 3 or higher, you need extra protection. So the medium, the high, the very high, the extremely high. And then low would be the 1 to 2. So this really kind of operates in almost a red light, green light system, with the addition of the purple being the extremely high. And so again, you want to look. I have seen days this summer where it has been in the high to very high in our area. And I may have missed it if it's been extremely high, but I have seen it frequently in the orange because my computer at home actually gives that alert on the taskbar. And so that's just something to consider. And just, extra precautions, particularly if you're going to have, a day outside, then that's something you may want to look at, and then take extra sunscreen, take extra hats, protective wear, and we'll talk about those options as well. So it's always going to be a good thing to cover your skin and to get in the shade. So a shade might be an umbrella, it might be a tent, it might be trees or overhead coverage in some way. But the best bet for you to get, outdoors and enjoy, being outside, especially if you're going to be near water or something that's going to reflect sand and water and things like that, asphalt, is to have some type of shade. You will see some people who actually carry an umbrella with them, and that is perfectly acceptable too. I mean, that's not something that's very typical that you're going to see here, but in other cultures, it's very typical to have an umbrella if it's very hot outside to protect the skin. But things like a tent, an umbrella, a hat that covers all of the edges of your face, because the tops of your ears are very sensitive to the sun. That's often where you will see skin cancer, particularly on people who work outside or who are outside a lot. You can have that on the backs of the ears, but also on the top rim of the ear. And so you want to make sure you have a wide brim hat that covers your ears, your nose, the tip of the nose especially is another common spot, and the back of the neck. And so clothing is going to be another option, making sure that you're wearing long sleeves, that you're covering, all of your, limbs and things, particularly if you're going to be outside working and you're not going out to like enjoy a day outside, golfing or, at the lake or, at the beach or something like that. Making sure you're covered, especially if you're doing, yard work or something that's going to have you outdoors during the hottest part of the day, and, being exposed to the sun for long periods of time, particularly if you can't stop being outside, that's going to be helpful. So having something that's going to cover up, having a beach cover up, I call it a beach cover up, whether I'm at the pool or the beach, but having something that you can put over your skin. I like the long sleeve ones that actually have some protection to them. But whatever works best with you. For kids, I have 5 kids, and so each of them has a different level of sun exposure that they can handle, and they also have a different level of cooperation on how much they will put sunscreen on and reapply. And so I have all my kids wear something on their heads, a hat at least, a baseball cap at the very least, if not one of the wide brim caps. And some of my kids have to wear those. And then all of my kids wear a long sleeve rash guard, but it's for sun protection. So it looks like a typical rash guard, but it has UV protection in it. And then, the boys have the longer swim trunks, and the girls are really cognizant of, having a beach cover up that they can put on that covers everything if their legs are getting too much sun. And that's something that we do because both my husband and I have had a history of melanoma or pre-melanoma and other types of skin cancers for both of us and for our family history. And so we have to be extra careful with our kids. And so those are some things that you might want to consider. Usually lighter colors are going to be something that people gravitate toward because it seems to like reflect the light differently. Some people prefer darker colors. There's not a ton of research out there about the different fabrics, but I just know I like to wear black a lot. I'm kind of known for wearing a lot of black in my wardrobe, and that definitely feels like it's hotter to me. People will say it absorbs the sun more. There's a lot of different thoughts on that now, but it's something that you want to consider. So, darker colors may offer more protection, but it may actually be warmer to the skin. So just consider, what your risks are and if that's going to cause you to overheat or something like that. You also have options to get certified actual national and international standards of UV protection. And so I'm going to offer you a brand that our dermatologist actually recommended to us. So hats, I've mentioned this, but having a hat that has a lot of protection is important. So most people are going to throw on a baseball cap. I try to get my family members, and especially my husband, who's had a lot of cancer on his face, to actually wear a wide brim hat with a little chin strap so that it stays in place. he's he's become a fan of it. He was not a fan originally. Before that, we were baseball cap kind of people, but it just doesn't offer enough protection. You have to be really careful with your scalp too, because especially once your hair starts to thin as we age, that's pretty typical. It's not always a sign of aging, but a lot of times our hair will thin on the crown of our head, and so you can get a lot of exposure to your scalp. I mentioned the nose, I mentioned the ears, but also the lips. That can be something that people don't often think about, having some protection on their lips as well. And then we're going to talk about different places to look for different moles and different sunburns so that you can be aware of like what your baseline is. So we'll talk about how to look at that. But make sure when you're wearing hats that they're not the kind of hats that have like the breathability in them. Make sure it's breathable, but it's not because it's open weaving. So those kind of trucker style baseball caps that have the mesh, that's not going to be super helpful. If the brim isn't wide enough, that's not going to be super helpful. So make sure that you're getting ones that are going to give you good coverage and that you're going to be likely to wear. So I always tell my family members, if you're not going to wear the wide brim hat for whatever reason, then I would rather you wear a baseball cap than you not, wear that more than what you need to wear. So like if you're just going to take it off 5 minutes after we get where we're going, I would rather you just wear the baseball cap because that's better than nothing. You also can get some different balms to go on your scalp and the different areas that I've mentioned that's a little different. You don't necessarily want to put sunscreen in your hair, traditional sunscreen. So there's some that are made specifically for the scalp, and I think that's really important to note. Sunglasses, there have been some recent studies that have come out saying that there's a mechanism of the light hitting the cornea of the eye, telling your body how to manage the sunlight exposure. And it's it's new research, and so there's not a lot out there in terms of changing guidelines, but oftentimes we say make sure you're wearing sunglasses to protect your eyes because you can get a sunburn on your eyes. I have actually done that, and it is very, very, very painful. I did that in high school on spring break. Never again. I learned my lesson. So I would say personally, and this is Abby's opinion. This is not, medical research based, but based on my synthesis of the literature and the new studies are out, I would say if you're going to be golfing near sand, if you're going to be outside working near concrete asphalt, if you're going to be in, or near water, especially at the beach, you're going to see me and my family wearing sunglasses because that light reflection, one, it's just not very fun to have that much light coming into the eye. But two, I think that you need the extra protection. Most people, I think, need the extra protection. just because you can get a sunburn, even from the reflection. And so that would be my suggestion. But if you're going to be outside in a grassy area, working in your garden or sitting on your porch or something like that, and you're not going to be out for hours and hours and hours, then I would say, have sunglasses, but maybe just leave them off for a few minutes. And if you see that you're sensitive to it, then put them on. Just do what your body tells you. A lot of times we come up with these recommendations and protocols. Nurses love a protocol. We live by them. But the thing is we're all different. And what I can tolerate today may be different than what I can tolerate tomorrow. And so have the sunglasses, have the hats, have the different things, and then listen to your body, listen to your intuition. So many times we try to, and my hand is raised, outsource our wisdom. We try to say, okay, well, what does Google say? What does this person say? What does that person say? When really, if we just get quiet and listen to ourselves, our body knows if we need our sunglasses. Our body knows if we need to put a hat on. Our body knows if we're thirsty. But usually we're so busy, myself especially, that we don't listen to that. And so, anyway, do what's best for you. But that would be my coaching on that. And maybe that can be applied to everything that you're doing in terms of health and wellness. So for sunscreen, there's been a lot of controversy. I'm sure you've seen it on TikTok and Instagram about all the carcinogens in sunscreen. And, the thing is that there's no perfect solution, right? We're all human. Life is hard. Sunscreen is no different. And you're going to hear a lot of different people say different things. For me, my family and I, we do wear sunscreen. I wear less sunscreen than probably my kids and my husband because I feel responsible for them as the nurse in the family. I tend to wear less sunscreen because I can tolerate more sun exposure. I don't typically burn. And so I can be out for a few hours and I can have a tan that looks like I've taken all summer to get. And I'm very fortunate in that, but other people can't. And so I try to just listen to my own body and then I make sure that my kids and my husband have sunscreen available. And I wear it too if I'm going to be out more than an hour or two. So sunscreens are going to have lots of different ingredients. Some are going to be the coral reef safe sunscreens that don't have the extra chemicals. Goodness knows that if it's better for wildlife in the ocean, it's going to be better for you. So try to get the ones that are considered coral safe, meaning that they're not going to damage the coral reefs when they wash off your body in the water at the ocean. You want to get ones that are organic, ones that have the zinc oxide, the ones that kind of leave that ghosty, that kind of ghosting is what they call it because it's a white film. That's usually going to be a zinc-based one. Those are typically better. There's mineral-based, and so that will probably stay on the skin more, but it's not going to give you the most aesthetic look, and that's okay. That's usually what I use for me and my kids. You want to make sure that you use what's considered a broad spectrum sunscreen. And this is with a SPF of 15 because that's the minimum recommendation that I found. For my husband who has had melanoma, he has had basal cell carcinoma, and he has had squamous cell carcinoma. So the three main types of skin cancer. His dermatologist actually recommended 100 SPF for him. And to reapply more frequently than every 2 hours, which is the minimum recommendation. So I would say make sure that you have a SPF that you're comfortable with and see how it works with your skin. I also will mention that you can have an allergy to SPF. And so you have to be really careful with that. It's not actually that rare. And so my brother actually, if he wears certain types of sunscreen, he will get a full body reaction to it and break out in like hives and be really red. And so they have to be very careful about the kind that they use in their family, but that's not uncommon. And so definitely think about testing an area before you're going to have a big day outside or you're going to wear a lot of sunscreen. You don't want to do head to toe sunscreen and then have a reaction to it because that's going to be quite miserable. You also want to check the expiration date. Sunscreen usually shouldn't be used more than 3 years. In the South, as hot as it gets here, as heavy as the UV exposure is here, I don't reuse sunscreen from the last year. So if we have sunscreen left over at the end of like August, September, which is where we'll stop being out in the sun as much, I might use it as far as like spring break, early May, but then I'm going to get all new SPF for next summer. By the time that it's getting really hot and we're outdoors more, I want new fresh sunscreen. And that's just what I do. So use what works best for you. I don't like to waste. And so I try to make sure that we don't do that, to try to be really conscious of it, but it's better to waste a little sunscreen than to have sunburn. Okay, so most adults need about an ounce of sunscreen to cover your body. Y'all, I think it's probably more than that. I don't know if it's just because I don't rub it in to the degree that they're saying to do it, but it's hard to rub sunscreen in like it's a lotion. So I would recommend just cover your skin well. About an ounce is probably good, but it's a baseline recommendation. But everybody is different, really. Everybody is different. So just use your sunscreen to the amount that you feel like you've got a nice thin layer of sunscreen. And that it's good and rubbed in. And just know that if you have a mineral sunscreen, it's never going to look like it's rubbed in. Apply sunscreen to all skin that clothing will not cover. I have my kids and my husband cover everything, even if they're going to have something on over it. So they put sunscreen on after they've gotten their swimsuit or whatever they're wearing for the day. And then if they're going to be wearing something over it, like a swim cover up or their rash guard, then they put that on over top. Now, that doesn't make me a popular mom, but that's what I do because it's giving them an extra layer of protection. And I recommend that for anybody. And then you want to wait at least 15 minutes to go outside to let it dry. Usually the recommendation is 30 minutes before you get into the water. And so that's a good kind of little prep time, is to make sure that you kind of set up your schedule where you can, still be getting things ready. So like when my kids were really little, I knew if we were going to leave that about 30 minutes beforehand. I have 5 kids, so I would have to apply sunscreen to 5 squirmy babies. And so I would give myself enough time to do that. So while they had their sunscreen drying, then I was finishing getting ready. So you can do something like that to make it feel like the time is passing by and you're not just having to wait for it to dry. That's my tip if you have little ones in your family. And then I personally like to avoid the aerosol spray sunscreen, which is really, really common with younger kids. But I mean, a lot of adults like it too because you're not having to rub it in. One, if you've ever been at the beach and someone has used the aerosol sunscreen, I feel like your neighbors get the sunscreen more than you actually do because the wind's blowing and it doesn't work real well. So I definitely wouldn't use it outside. But honestly, it's not great to use indoors either just because of your lung health. That aerosol spray is a lung irritant, meaning that it can aggravate your lungs, especially for people who have lung conditions, respiratory issues like asthma. So probably a covered place outside, like a porch that doesn't have like fans or isn't overly windy, it's probably the best spot. So it's outdoors, it's ventilated, but you're not in the elements. It's not, going to be going on to your neighbors. And when you can taste it in your mouth, then you know that you're inhaling it to a degree that it could irritate your lungs. So aerosol sunscreens are a no-go in the Horton house. But that being said, a lot of the people that we love them. And so we just have to say, hey, we're not going to use those for our kids, and it's okay. And then I move them out of the way when someone has those out. I just think it works best for our family, but they're super convenient. So it's better than nothing is what I always tell people. So if that's all you have or that's all you want to use, obviously that's probably better than not doing anything. Reapplying sunscreen, like I said, every 2 hours is the general rule. If you're going to be swimming or sweating heavily, or if you're going to be doing anything that might, have that sunscreen come off of your skin, like it mentions towel drying. Maybe you're playing golf outside and you're wiping your hands a lot. Hands are something we don't think about putting sunscreen on, but our hands wrinkle a lot as we age, and our hands are something that we're constantly using and washing and exposing. And so think about making sure that you have good protection on your hands. Or, if you're outside, maybe in the garden and you're doing it without your gloves on, or you're putting gloves on and off, that could be taking your sunscreen off. So golfing and gardening are on my brain today, y'all. But those are my 2 examples of making sure that if you're using something that's going to get that off of the skin, you're reapplying more frequently. And the recommendation is just when you think that you need to. So after you've been in the water for, 30 minutes to an hour, you may need to reapply. Again, that's going to be based on the individual. So sun safety, we're wearing that broad rim hat. We're using sunglasses. We're wearing protective clothing. We're avoiding the sun. Again, anything from 9 to 3 or 10 to 4. So basically 9 to 4 is kind of what we're looking at. The recommendations definitely vary depending on where the graphics are made, just because of those outdoor conditions. Using sunscreen, again, the minimum recommendation is 15 SPF, but that's not much. And then drinking a lot of water. There's new research out all the time about how much water you should be drinking. Some people base it on how much calories and protein and macros you're consuming. Some people base it on your body weight, so half of your body weight in ounces a day. So if you weigh 200 pounds, you're drinking about 100 ounces of water. The general recommendation, though, is that if you're kind of a typical person, a typical human, at least 64 ounces of water a day. I know some people are saying that you can go less than that. I don't personally believe that that's a good idea, but 64 ounces of water a day, probably up to no more than 128 ounces, because that's looking at a gallon of water a day. And depending on how much you're outdoors, how much you're, sweating, perspiring, how much you're talking, because I'm talking so much, my respiratory rate is going to increase, which means my moisture that I'm losing is going to increase. So if you're talking a lot and you're suddenly thirsty after you stop, it's because you've been getting a lot more moisture out by talking in that way. So drinking plenty of water is going to be helpful. The reflection caution that we've mentioned, and then seeking shade and avoiding the direct sunlight. Those are all good tips. So healthy skin. Other things to consider when you're driving, a lot of times you're going to see more sun damage on the left side of the body because you've got the sun coming in from the window and it's going to be on the left side of your face and your left arm. So people who drive a lot for a living or people who are just typically the person who's driving, make sure that you're mindful of that. Try not to put your arm in the window. A lot of people do that when they drive, but I would recommend that you don't for a lot of reasons. It's not very safe because if you get hit, that's going to hurt your arm and probably break your bone. But don't put your arm up there. Again, if you're the passenger, it could be the right side of the body. And just another safety tip, don't put your feet in the dashboard and prop them up on these road trips during the summer because that's a really common fracture when people are in wrecks that's going to hurt those legs and break those hips and those femurs. So not a fun experience. So especially with the airbags that deploy, that just causes a lot of damage. And so, but it also is causing sun exposure even on a good day. Taking 5-minute showers or less. I say this, but I take longer showers. I love a good shower, but if you're taking longer showers or longer baths, then you're really getting rid of those natural oils that protect the skin. And so you want to make sure that when you're taking a shower, it's not so hot that it's turning your skin a red color or a pink color, and that you're not soaking in water usually more than 30 minutes a night. And usually no more than 5 or 10 minute showers because you're going to need to replenish those natural oils, and nothing that we can put on our body is ever going to be as good as our natural oils that we have. And again, avoiding that hot water, even in things like washing your hands with hot water. We say warm soapy water now in healthcare world just because we used to say hot water and we had just, tons of problems with our hands getting rashes and sores. My knuckles when I worked as a nurse doing direct patient care all of the time, especially during the winter, I would have red knuckles and I would have tears on my hands from having washed my hands so much. So making sure that you're moisturizing your skin with a lotion, typically a lotion that would go on the body and then a lotion that would go on the face. You typically want to have two different types of lotions. I know that sounds really high maintenance, and I've just recently started doing that as I've started to get older. But that really does help because the lotion you need for your face is usually a little bit different than the lotion you need for your body. Your face needs a little bit more delicate lotion. Your body usually needs a little bit heavier, thicker lotion for more moisture. I really contemplated putting my favorite lotions on here, but I've learned that lotion is so specific to the individual. You really need to get someone who specializes in that, either a dermatologist or an esthetician that can give you a good profile on what your skin needs. And so I can always give recommendations of what I like and how my skin is, but and even in different seasons of life, different lotions and moisturizers work differently for me. And so I would definitely say get a consult on that. And then this is my recommendation. I like to drink your half of your body weight in ounces a day. And that's usually 4 to 8 ounces per hour while awake. And that's really the minimum because your kidneys need some good hydration. Our bodies are about 70 to 80% water, so we've got to be replenishing that. And we can lose up to about a liter of water a day just in our normal activities. So skin cancer risk, 1 in 5 Americans will develop skin cancer in their lifetime. Tanning beds, if you use them before age 35, increases your skin cancer risk by 75%. And I'm unfortunately a part of that risk factor. I went for my dermatology check last week. I'm going every 6 months now that I've had some moles that have had some changes in them. And it looks like there may be a mole on my leg that is pre-melanoma or melanoma. And so I will be having that, what's called scraped, where they just, go in and scoop it instead of having to do an incision and cut it out and do stitches. This allows you not to have stitches, which is good. So I'll have to have that and one on the back of my ear. So the two that I told you, the two spots that are really common. But I'm going to tell you where to look for those common places. It's based on male, female, and it's a combination of hormones and lifestyle of why it's different for men and women. Recognizing that we're talking in binaries because that's how research is done in healthcare. So people who use tanning beds are more likely to develop squamous cell carcinoma, and there are 2.5 times more at risk for that. And that's usually, basal cell is usually the kind of the first layer of skin. It's usually the least concerning. And I know that sounds odd to say in terms of cancer, because cancer is always a little concerning, obviously, but basal and then squamous and then melanoma. And then if you've had skin cancer, risk factors like burns, you have to be mindful of that. So if you've had more than 5+ sunburns in your lifetime, then you have a more than double skin cancer risk for your lifetime. 90% of pediatric melanoma cases are in young girls, 10 to 19, and that is usually based on lifestyle factors, not because of any kind of genetic or hormonal issue. It's just because right now having a tan is in. And so that's in style, and that's what young girls do. And so that's something to be mindful of if you have daughters in that age. I do. I have a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old daughter. And then, unfortunately, 1 American dies every hour from melanoma. And so it's the most common cancer typically. Now, this is changing because breast cancer is on the rise for women right now in this age group, but typically it's the most common skin cancer and most common cancer overall for women ages 25 to 29. But unfortunately, breast cancer is really starting to become more prevalent for young women, particularly right now. It takes about 28 days for new skin cells to grow. And so I think that that's really an interesting fact to share because every month we get a new opportunity to take better care of our skin and our health. And I love that because the health that we have today can be different the next month. It can be better. And I think that's why you're here. You're wanting to improve your health. And so I hope that's inspiring to you. It inspires me. There are 2 million non-melanoma cases of cancer diagnosed every year in the US, and that is usually basal or squamous cell. There are other types of skin cancers, but those are the three most common. And then this is an example of what these look like. So basal cell carcinoma is that pearly, waxy bump or flat brown lesion, and it's the most easily treated. Squamous usually has a scaly patch or kind of a flakiness to it, and it's treated easily and detected early. It's more likely to spread than basal cell carcinoma, but there's still a lot of good treatment options for it. And then melanoma, I always tell my nursing students the ones that they include in the textbook, these are like textbook images. The examples that they include in the textbook, whether it's a description, a case study, a picture of something, they always pick the worst, like the most severe example of that, right? So a lot of times melanoma does not look this black and dark and kind of ominous. And so I say that because if you have one that doesn't look quite this dramatic, quite this dark, quite this angry, because the one on my leg does not, and the ones that I've had before have not. The ones that my husband have had, he's had melanoma that got into lymph nodes. It didn't look like this. It wasn't scary looking like that. And so I want to let you know that because you want to be mindful that it's not always going to be that extreme. Okay. All right. So the trunk, so the back and the front of the torso for men, it's more likely for them to have some type of cancer there. And for women, it's the leg. And so Mine is on my upper leg, and that's a really common spot. It's also very common to have melanoma and different cancers on the backs of the body. So the back of the leg, the back of the ear, the back of the neck, or the back of the torso, so the actual back. So that's why it's so important that you have someone that can look at those areas for you. I would recommend getting a dermatology check every year. Once you get into probably your 20s and 30s, that's probably a good thing to ask about and see if your risk factors for it in terms of your lifestyle and your family history warrant that. But you need to have someone at home who also can look at that for you. And I know that can be challenging if you live alone or there's lots of reasons why that could be challenging, but do the best you can, even using a mirror. There's lots of workarounds, but being able to have someone or some way to look at the back of your body, because a lot of times, for whatever reason, the melanoma and the different things are going to be on the back of the body, the backs of the legs. There's some other areas too that I'm going to tell you about. But what you're looking for is know your ABCDEs. And I actually have seen F added. So I added F today because I could not find a graphic that had F on there. But you're looking for asymmetry. So if you folded your mole, because the melanoma is going to be around those dark pigmented areas, so usually a mole. But if you have a mole like this that's asymmetrical, meaning that if you drew a line down the middle and you folded it and it didn't fold in half perfectly or near perfectly, because nothing on the body is perfect, then that's asymmetrical. That may be a concern, especially if your other moles don't look like that. Border. If the border is uneven, like it is here, right? Like, see, that's even border. This is uneven. If there's a variety of colors in there, which is what mine look like when they start to kind of morph and change, mine start to get this color and the border issue. And none of my moles are symmetrical, so that's not a thing for me, but I have to look at border and color. Also, they get bigger. So the diameter, how big they are, how wide they are across. So if they're more than a pencil eraser in their size, in their diameter, then that can be a concern, particularly if your other moles are smaller than that, okay? It's not as concerning if your other moles look like that as well. And then evolution, and we sometimes say elevation here. So evolution meaning something has changed in the shape, the color, the elevation, or something else about it, or that maybe they're tender. Sometimes they're tender or they start to peel up off of the skin because the immune system is trying to get rid of that thing that's bothering it. You can have a lot of inflammation and just feel kind of like flu-like when you have moles that start to change. And you feel like you're like, why do I feel like I have the flu in the summertime? A lot of times it can be because of that if you do have an issue with a mole. And then you almost immediately feel better. It's amazing how the body responds to that. But elevation is also how much it's rising up. So usually moles are flat. I have a lot of moles that are elevated, meaning that when you rub your finger across them, you can feel an elevation. You can feel it bumps up. That's not true for most people, for a lot of people. So you have to make sure, like, is it more elevated or have I never had an elevated mole and now it suddenly is? And then F is for funny looking. It's just there's something about it that looks different than all of your other moles. So if you have a spot that looks concerning, the dermatologist or clinician is going to look at your body and say, okay, does that mole look, different than all of the other moles on this person's body? If yes, then that may be a cause for concern and more exploration. So F is for funny looking. It's just something looks different. So I also want to mention sun poisoning. Anytime you get blisters, you're looking at different skin burns. So you can actually get, true skin damage and skin burns and sun poisoning. So it's really, really important to be mindful of this. And these are the symptoms of sunburns and sun poisoning. And you're going to have full body symptoms: brain fog, headache, fatigue, dehydrated. You're probably going to have a lot of itching, maybe nausea and vomiting. You can even have a fever, and you can have blisters. Again, I have had blisters more than once because I did not practice good sun safety. And so just know that if you have seen it here, I have done it. I've made that mistake. And so we're not perfect, but we just have to learn and do better. And so these are very, very painful. And if you have these blisters, you do need to seek medical care so that they can give you creams, because when these blisters burst, and they will, you don't necessarily want to burst them yourselves. That's going to be very painful, but they can give you sunburn cream, like a medical grade cream to put on there, maybe that has some lidocaine in it, but also will help prevent scarring. And that's going to be really important, especially depending on where they are. Most of the time, they're on the shoulders. Common sun-related different conditions. We mentioned sun poisoning. We've talked about sunburn, heat rash, and heat exhaustion. So anytime you have something where there's a crease under the breast tissue in any kind of like bend of the arms of the skin, especially if you have like an apron type skin fold on your stomach, which a lot of us have. On the creases of the legs or in the groin, you can get heat rash, and there's a lot of good corticosteroid creams for that. But again, if that persists, you're going to want to seek some different solutions in terms of like medical intervention, because you can develop yeast infections from that if it goes on, and that's very, very painful. Heat exhaustion or heat stroke are also common, and those are going to require medical intervention because usually you're going to need some fluids. So just be mindful of those. And don't forget to protect your eyes, your ears, your lips, your nose, your scalp, and the back of the neck. Just as a reminder, you also, like I mentioned, your eyes and eyelids. So I love to use BioTrue hydration drops. You can get them at any local pharmacy. And if you just have dry eyes, I think this is one of the best drops. And I cleared it with my ophthalmologist because I didn't want to take a prescription. And these are very, very good. So I always have a couple on hand, but they are preservative free. So you just want to make sure that you keep them in date and look at the expiration date. Getting that 15 to 30 minutes in the sun for skin health is also important. So you need 5 to 10 minutes for your eyes, but around 15 to 30 in the morning just for your overall sun health. And then being mindful of medications or conditions that make you prone to photosensitivity or to burning. So if you take things like lisinopril, hydrochlorothiazide, things like that for blood pressure or heart, and then there's some mental health medications. There's lots of medications, but those are the common ones that you can see people get sunburned really, really easily. You also want to check your nail beds, the bottoms of your feet, and places that often don't get sun, because nail beds, fingernail beds, toenail beds, bottoms of feet are actually common places to see melanoma. And that's not always what you think about, because you're thinking, oh, that doesn't get much sun exposure. But I've had a friend who had melanoma on the bottom of her foot, and that's really, really hard to detect sometimes. So one of the things that you also want to be mindful of is that people who have darker pigmented skin are less likely to develop skin cancer, but unfortunately, I think for a lot of reasons, sometimes it's harder to screen on darker skinned individuals, but also that we have this issue of health disparities and health inequality. And so when people who do have darker pigmented skin develop skin cancer, unfortunately, they usually are at a more advanced stage and it's more difficult to treat. And so we need to be really, really mindful of that if we do have darker pigmented skin, to advocate for ourselves, to do self screenings, and then if there's any clinicians on the call, then we want to make sure that we're also screening for those. And then again, with developing melanoma, it's going to be usually on the soles of the feet, the palms of the hands, in between the fingers and the toes, and in those nail beds. So see a dermatologist for your annual skin check. Do your regular skin checks at home. I say at least once per month when you do all your others, your breast exam, your self-testicular exam, just all the things that you're doing for your good health. Add in your skin assessment. Have someone check those areas that are hard to see, and then know your risk factors and share them with your healthcare providers. So what are your lifestyle or behavioral risks? Do you work outside? What's your family history? My granddaddy died from complications of melanoma, and so I have to make sure I tell that every time I go and see a provider. Do I have a previous diagnosis or concern? And are there other risk factors like environmental concerns? And then this is just a general tips review. I think if you wanted to sum up all of the slides in one slide, it would be this one. So I'm not going to read it to you, but it's a good one that you can just print out and hopefully use to help others know. And then some other products that you can use. This is the Neutrogena 100 Plus that our dermatologist recommends. But the Super Goop Everyday Lotion with Sunscreen SPF is really, really popular right now. And I like it. A lot of clinicians and clinics and med spas actually recommend the Super Goop, but most dermatologists are going to recommend something like the Neutrogena Ultra Sheer 100 Plus. Here's the Think Dirty's Ultimate Sunscreen Guide. If you're looking for something that's a little bit more natural, just realize that it's not going to be as effective and you're going to have to apply more often. So you don't want to risk sunburn, but these are the greener options. And then this is the Think Dirty app where you can actually scan and see what your hazards are. So they use the green, yellow, red light system as well in terms of what's best. So you're looking for a low hazard of 1 to 2 for products. And then here's some things for sunburn. Lavaderm by Young Living. I love BioCool. You can get it on Amazon. It has lidocaine in it, so I don't ever put it near or on the heart because that can cause some symptoms for you. But BioCool is amazing. I don't go anywhere without it if we're going to be outdoors. Of course, the good old aloe vera gel. And then lavender, if it's a medical grade lavender, works really well to take the sting out of sunburns. And then this is the brand, I guess it's Solumbra is how I would pronounce it. I haven't heard it pronounced, but that's how I would say it. And they have a lot of good SPF clothing. It's very, very pricey, but this is what a dermatologist would recommend in terms of having a lot of good SPF coverage. We would love for you to follow us on our social media channels. And this is my contact information again if you have any questions or want to reach out. So I'm going to go to the chat and see if there's anything in the chat. Miranda, let me know if you see anything I need to address. Yeah, so a lot of you have had some things. Vitamin D, it is, let me look at the brand for you. It's Life Protocol, but I want to make sure I tell you that correctly. Any feedback, any other questions, comments? Did this cover what you thought it was going to cover? Was it helpful? Protocol for Life Balance, vitamin D3. Good. I'm so glad. Probably need to add the vitamin D picture to the slide. I think that's probably going to be a common question. Yes, Diane says she learned the hard way that sunscreen expires. Yeah, I think we've all been there. Good. I'm glad this was helpful to y'all. Any questions? I know we're at time, so if you need to go, I completely understand. You don't need to do anything else but log off and we'll say roll tide to you. But if anyone has questions or anything else, I'm happy to stay and answer. The last few slides are jam-packed. I know I do tend to overdo my slides. So if any of y'all are in computer science, I know I break the rules on slide presentations, but I want you to have all the information and then pick what works for you. Yeah, learned about the umbrella on study abroad. Yeah, that's so smart. I love learning from what other people do. Maybe we can make it something that we do here. We can have roll tide umbrellas. We need them. Good. I'm so glad. Well, we don't have to worry about the sun today. I know it was a little sunny earlier, but it sounds like we've got some good rain coming in. So, but I do hope that when the sun comes back out, that you're able to get out there and enjoy it in a healthy and safe way, and not to be afraid of it. Right? We're going to befriend the sun with some healthy boundaries, and enjoy the rest of our summer. So it was lovely to be with y'all today. Reach out if I can do anything for y'all. And if y'all have any feedback or suggested topics or things like that, you're always welcome to reach out to me or Miranda. We're happy to do that. She is wellness work life. I'm just get to join y'all. So thank y'all so much and have a great rest of your day. Bye.